So we're looking at preferential payment demands today, and what's happened is you've received a letter from a liquidator after one of your clients has gone into liquidation saying, we've identified you've received preferential payments, we require you to pay these back. Now, generally the period of time is 6 months, and usually it's all the payments you've received during that period, and the liquidator says, well, you should have known these people were going broke. Anything they paid you actually belongs to me as a liquidator to be shared by all creditors. Now, oftentimes we usually get involved after the first phone call has been made. But if you're watching this and you've recently received a letter from a liquidator, we recommend saying nothing. And the worst thing you can do is ringing your old customer or ringing the liquidator and saying, well, you know, he stopped paying me 3 months ago, or he only paid me in dribs and drabs, or he was paying me round dollar amounts, because what the liquidator is looking for is proof that you should have known something was wrong. And to give you an example, we had one of our clients who'd made a delivery in the morning. The gates were shut as they were leaving. All of a sudden, a liquidator turned around and said, well, you received preferential payments for the last 6 months. We want you to hand everything back. And they said, but we had no idea we were delivering on the day you were appointed. But what they did was they looked at their payment history, they looked at the regularity, they looked at their trading terms and said, well, a normal business operator would have realised something was wrong. So what we say to you is, if you receive one of these letters, the most important thing you do is not to contact the liquidator and not to contact your old customer. The most important thing you must do is get advice, because what you don't want to do is confirm inadvertently something that then gets brought up in court if you contest the preferential payment demand. So what we also say is, before you do anything, don't confirm anything with the liquidator, and certainly don't offer to make a payment until you know what your rights are. And what we recommend highly is to come and have a chat to an organisation like us, where we can give you some guidance as to what your responsibilities are and what your rights are. So a conversation I often have when someone receives one of these notices is, how is this fair? And quite frankly, it's not. It's a very, very unfair process where you've been doing work, you've had to pay your subbies, you've got sporadic payments from your client, and then all of a sudden they stop paying and go into liquidation. And then a liquidator says, well, wait a second, all those payments you received for the last 6 months, they belong to me. You go, but I had to pay my subbies, I had to buy materials. How is it fair that I have to hand that money back? And honestly, it's not. This is a very, very, very unfair set of rules, but ultimately they were written by liquidators for the benefit of liquidators. So what you need to remember is there's steps you can take to protect yourself, but if you're expecting fairness from this, it doesn't exist. So what can you do? Well, in all of these cases, you must get advice. The biggest risk that people take is to do something unilaterally or to do it without actually knowing what their position is. And unfortunately, we've had where people have gone off, rung up the liquidator, said, well, this guy had stopped paying me 3 months ago. Unfortunately, that means that you've known that he was going into liquidation, so you've fallen foul of the preference rules. So the most important thing, and we keep saying this, is to say nothing to the liquidator until you get advice. Your options are very limited, and you need to be very clinical in how you deal with these notices. So these generally come up in our experiences inside the building industry, and this is something that is becoming harder and harder. Now recently there's been changes in New South Wales and Queensland where if you're the director or involved in a company that's gone into liquidation or administration, then you can't hold a builder's licence. And that period of time could be 3 years, it could be lifetime. So if you receive one of these preference notices and it pushes your business into liquidation, well, you may lose your ability to earn an income. And they are very unfair on that front. So what you need to be wary of is where you're supplying to, especially B and C grade developers or builders, what risk you're actually taking. And are you going to find out after you finish the project that all of a sudden you're put at risk because they've gone into liquidation? And you might say, well, it won't happen to me. I've always been paid on time. But there's little indicators that a liquidator might say, well, you should have known. So, for example, if your bill was $5,000, but they paid you $4,000 one week and $1,000 in the next, that's sufficient for a liquidator to say, well, you should have known something was wrong. The problem is that the standard that the liquidators are applying is substantially higher than what you would normally expect. Now, let's use the example of a carpenter who has been receiving payments the whole way through, but then his client says, look, I'm having a bit of a cash flow problem. Can I pay you a bit slower? Now, if he says yes, it's normal business practice. He wants to get paid, but he's now forced to say, well, is that a preference payment, or is there a risk of a preference payment if this company goes into liquidation? Now, the carpenter may never think of this, but that conversation could come back to bite him should that builder go into liquidation. And this is why this is quite an unfair legislation, but equally it's something that you as a business owner need to be prepared for. If you have actually received one of these notices, what we recommend is just give us a call or visit our website. We have a lot of resources available, and equally if you need a conference just to understand what you can and can't do, please give us a call on 1300 023 782. We're always available to talk you through this, and we have a lot of experience in dealing, especially in the building industry, with people who have received preferential payment demands.